The next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the December 17th, 2025 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second, all in favor?
Hi.
And Jill's online. Hi, Jill.
Hi, guys.
Is there any public comment? No public comment, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Program of Studies for Bristol Public Schools, presented by Principal Higgins.
Before the Bristol Eastern Administration share the program of studies, just a little context, since this is the first time that you're seeing the program of studies as commissioners. We present by board policy a review of the program of studies once yearly. Everything that's within our program of studies is already part of our curriculum documents. For the main part, what you're going to be seeing as our team presents the program of studies this year are course descriptions, any prerequisites, the amount of credit that the courses bear. It's used as a tool to help our students select their courses. Bristol Eastern and Bristol Central administration take turns being responsible for presenting the Student Achievement Committee. That's why you're hearing from Bristol Eastern tonight. Next year, you'll hear from Bristol Central. Be assured that we have the same program of studies for both schools. Our students have access to the same courses for the most part, with some unique circumstances around courses that may require different certifications, such as the ECE courses that we had talked about our last meeting. With that, I'll turn it to Principal Higgins.
Thank you, Mrs. Fortin. So I'm here to do the broad strokes with the program studies, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Assistant Principal Melanie Petrano, who gets into the nitty gritty and finer details of the program of study. I had the pleasure of doing the program of study for years in a different format, and Mrs. Petrano took lead on turning it into a much more website user-friendly digitized format a couple of years ago, and is kind of the keeper of this product at this point for both high schools. She's become the point person. On the main page, if you scroll down, you'll see the Bristol Public Schools Vision of the Graduate in both languages, English and Spanish, so that families can access the broad picture and the Bristol Public Schools ideals that embody the vision of the graduate. Below that, you can click on many different links that bring you to different things such as class schedules, college credit opportunities, the grad requirements, which are very important and been revised continually year after year. And you can see the different tabs for not only Bristol Central, Bristol Eastern, and also Bristol Preparatory Academy. The column on the left has drop-down menus. And again, if you click on the first one that says actual program of studies, it will bring you into the rather large document that embodies all of the courses that we offer. Yep. Melanie, do you want to say something? Also accessible that way by department. Yep. No, that's right. I'll hand it over to you in a moment. So by department, you have everything here. And what's nice about this is even under, say, take CTE, we used to kind of have CTE as one big, large grouping of courses. Melanie took the time to break it down into the different pathways and subdivisions of CTE. You'll also see all of the other departments, English, social studies, the core four, as you will, but also, the fine arts and special education courses that are offered as well. Back on that left-hand column, we don't have to go through every single feature of it. I'm going to give this to Melanie in one moment, but you can see a whole bunch of different resources this way too, that talk about additional opportunities such as mastery credit, which was a requirement for about a minute in time, but it's still an offering that provides students an extra opportunity to earn credit toward graduation, and even driver's education, which is not necessarily a course offered through our school. It's really an adult education course, but it is still offered. And if anyone was taught how to drive by Mr. John Gerard, he's still doing that all these years later. So there's just a whole plethora, if you will, of information there that can be accessed that we don't necessarily have to delve into tonight. But I know Melanie wants to say some things about updates and some new opportunities coming our way in the upcoming school year.
So as Mr. Higgins said, initially, or up to 3 years ago, the program of studies was probably about a 140-page document that we had to load, and it was just very unuser friendly. So to kind of hold or grab students' attention, we moved it into this Google site where students can click and scroll and see different things. If you were to click on, say, maybe social studies there on the right, when it opens to that page, we have the descriptions of the courses. We have them both in English and Spanish. Since it is a Google Doc, they can be open and translated into any language. So that's the nice part of it. And you can see these documents have been kept now by CIS. I know, I go. Looks like we teach law and justice and I call it law and order. It's law and order to me. I can't. So these documents have been reviewed by Laura and Leshik, and they're making those updates as courses are added, curriculum is changed based on votes that are coming out of our committee work. So it shows the different pathways, and what we want to do, if you continue to scroll down, what we want to start doing is embedding more pictures and videos. So for a student, especially with our elective offering, to be able to say, I took this course and this is what I learned, or these are the skills that I garnered, or this is how this helped me. So that again, it just becomes a little bit more interactive for students. We really are trying to get students and parents to look at this. We just had our grade 8 open house last night, and this was something we shared with parents because kids tend sometimes to sign up for a course thinking, oh, intro to digital technology, say, oh, I'm going to take that class because I like, whatever they have in their mind, but then they go to the class and it's not what was expected. So we really try to get kids to really select the courses that they're interested in taking, because that's how the master schedule was built. So that's how we know how many sections we need. And if they don't really have an understanding and they want to switch right at the beginning of the year, it's like, well, I just want to take pottery now, but pottery's not offered that course and there are no spots. So we really want kids to be really thoughtful as they're picking their classes. Again, as Ms. Fortin said, there's nothing new in this document. It's just really a compilation of all of the curriculum that is passed, policy that is passed and changed, such as the graduation requirements. And that's kind of where we are with this. It is a living, breathing document that can be updated as needed. We do have all of the Google Docs are in a folder that's shared among the team, so that they can go in and be edited and added as necessary. Again, I really think it has a lot of potential to become that much more interactive and user-friendly for students.
So again, by policy, the Student Achievement Committee and the full board has to approve the program of studies once per year. I think that was back in the day when we did have a printed booklet. We wanted to have that approval. Now that we're moving to more digitized resources for students, and it could be updated as the board is approving new curriculum. That's what's been happening. There's not that single point in time. However, we want to make sure that we're following the policy, and because this is the start of course selection, we think it's the appropriate time to bring it forward in front of student achievement and then ultimately to the full board in front of it.
Right, so since everything is like the revisions are approved as you go along and everything on here has either been approved or the revision will be approved. I just wanted to confirm that, and I feel better about just approving this. So you used to approve the document, but now this is digitized. Is this the first year or it just been a couple of years? Third, okay. Okay, so I need a motion to approve the program of studies for Bristol Public Schools.
So moved.
Second the motion.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to say it looks great, and I love the idea about making it more interactive. I think that's a way to just kind of increase the engagement and the use of the document. I think it looks awesome.
I think the translation piece too, that you can translate it in any language if you need to do that to kind of get a better understanding. I like that. Then all in favor? Say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. The next item on the agenda is Carly Fortin presenting college and career readiness data.
See, the high school administrators thought they were just here to talk about the program of studies, but I'm sure they have some things to contribute to the next presentation as well. Although you put in a lot of late nights and a lot of work certainly into that. You had your orientation last night. If we need to leave at any moment, you would understand that. Okay, so again, at the beginning of the school year, I shared a calendar of presenting data to the Student Achievement Committee. This is the next smallest subset of data that we have available to us. Post-secondary data comes out later than some of the other data sets that we've already presented. But this is the final kind of, you'll see before I get to the next data presentation, but the more detailed subset of data before we get to the overall accountability. There are a few ways of looking at post-secondary education, both in readiness, preparation, and then outcomes. So the first set of data that I'm sharing is post-secondary outcome data, which looks at what happens for students once they leave the halls of our high schools. It's an important data set for us to review, but it is one that can be challenging to influence directly. And so let me just explain a little bit about what you're looking at here. That blue line is representative. Well, let me orient you to the axes first. So you'll see the year of the graduating class along the x-axis there. Thanks, Caitlin, for pointing that out. And so our most recent set of data, you'll see that blue dot in the class of 2024. That is the percent of students who are entering into college as after graduation. So we're at 60.5. I know that number is challenging to read from a distance. Then you'll see that brown line at the top. That's students who persist in college beyond their first year. So enrolled at the college level in their sophomore year. That's why you could see the data points increasing as we're moving to the left, because we're looking for a more complete set of data. Students are persisting through college. The orange line, the line all the way at the bottom, is the number of students who are graduating within 4 years upon their entrance in college. You can see that colleges also need to look at their persistence rate as students being able to persist through the 4 years there. And then finally, that red color is the percent of students who are graduating within 6 years. These graphs are specific to Bristol Public School graduates. And then at the bottom there, you could see what the state averages are. In terms of looking at our information, you could see that there's a pretty decent gap between our most recent college entrance rate at 60.5 and the entrance rate for schools across the state. It is an area that you're going to hear me speak about next when I talk about our accountability system, one that we need to further delve into to really see what those obstacles are for our students in entering college. One important note about this set of data, it does not, and sometimes our school counselors, this is important to them, does not include any students that might be entering military, does not include any students that might be entering into private occupational schools, like a tech school, for example, of going to school for welding or HVAC. Those students aren't represented in that 60% number. It doesn't also include any students who are transitioning into apprenticeships. So this is college. The other important kind of fact about our ability to work with this data is that it is given to us through the tracking of students by their IDs post graduation from us. So we're always a bit delayed in being able to respond to this data because it's essentially the schools are reporting back to the state of Connecticut, who then publishes this data to us. We don't have a mechanism built within the accountability system and any of the tools that we use to be able to track what's happening for students once they graduate from Bristol. I had explored a program in the past to try to see if we could have a better handle on that, to be able to track what's happening with students after their second year or why they're not persisting all the way through. But there wasn't a program that existed that would allow us to do that. most of the programs that are out there are for colleges tracking their own data, not necessarily reporting back to their center school. This is Bristol as a whole, so it includes students who might be in out of district placements. And when we go to the next slide, we have school specific data. So this is Bristol Central High School. They have a slightly higher college entrance rate this year at 65.1. You'll see that their data is really mirroring some of the pre-pandemic percentages as well. The next slide has Bristol Eastern. And what I think is notable here is that they've had a pretty steady climb over the years. We're not seeing the up and down pattern that we saw in the prior two slides. Some steady improvement with some significant improvement in, let's say, the 2021 to the 2022 school year, growing by 4 percentage points. And right now, growing from 62 last year to 69.3 this past year. So that's great that you're here to get that acknowledgement. Good work, Bristol's. I'm going to move on to two other indicators in our accountability system that are related to post-secondary, that being post-secondary preparation and post-secondary readiness. In the next generation report, which I'm going to go over next, sometimes the state refers to this as college and career readiness, CCR indicators 5 and 6. The state is making some moves to better recognize that some students might be going into some of the trades or post-secondary occupational education. And so you'll see this shifting over in the upcoming years where we are going to be looking at certifications that students have earned in addition to college entrance. So starting with post-secondary preparation, that really is focused on the percent of students in grades 11 and 12 who are taking courses with us that bear college credit. So that would be through a dual enrollment course. You're hearing me talk about ECE classes that would explain that. It would also include students who are enrolled in an AP class. It also includes students who are taking 2 CTE courses. So you often hear Laura Lanza presenting CTE courses. They have clusters that work together as a pathway to careers. When students take 2 of those courses in the pathways, that counts towards their post-secondary preparation, or they have 2 workplace experiences. They're not necessarily courses, but you would see them in our data tracking as a course. They're out in internships. The next term is post-secondary readiness. So when students are in the course, then we're looking at whether they have met the standards to earn the college credit in those courses. So again, that's now, if I'm in an AP class, this is looking at whether I've earned a 3 or better. If I'm in a dual enrolled class, that means have I earned the credit by the university who we're dually enrolled with by the standards that they've set. We also look at the percent of students who are meeting the benchmark for literacy and math on the SAT. That's another indicator. So all of that, we're looking at students in grades in 11 and 12 who've met that benchmark. That just gives you a sense of the terms that we're talking about. So there's college entrance, there's post-secondary entrance, post-secondary preparation, taking the course, post-secondary readiness, passing the course. It's titled. So highlights for this upcoming set of data is that we have more students than ever who are taking courses that prepare them for post-secondary opportunities. You'll see that we're at the top of the game there. And that's really due to a concentrated effort to increase course offerings, and then also making sure that our students know what's available to them through things just like we just looked at, the program of studies. We also have a greater percentage of students in Bristol who are enrolled in the post-secondary readiness than the state by about 6%. So we're outperforming the state in that indicator. And then finally, when we look at the specific ways in which students can qualify for that preparation, but taking the courses, we see that we've increased by 200% the number of students who are enrolled in dual enrollment courses. That is, again, a credit to some curriculum work that's happened over the past few years. Just last year, Leszek had worked on some pathways in the humanities areas. Oftentimes when we think about careers, we think in the STEM areas, yet we know we have students who might be really interested in law and justice and want to see themselves become a lawyer or a resource officer in the future. And so he's built out some pathways with universities, helping students who might be more interested in. And so we're seeing some of that increase as a result of that curriculum work. And again, the connection to schools and encouraging students to take those courses. So we'll look at the specific data now. This first slide is the preparation. So students taking courses. And this slide shows you the state on the left and Bristol as an entire district on the right. So you could see the 98% of our students are taking these courses. Again, dual enrollment, AP, or two CTE classes, 2 workplace experience classes at a higher rate than what we see across the state. And then the next slide on the left, we see Bristol Central at 99.1% of their students who are in grades 11 and 12 who have engaged in these activities, and 98% at Bristol Eastern School. There's not that much more room to grow here, but I know they look at every single 11th and 12th grader and looking at how they best can support them on their college entrance journey. On passing exams, this is an indicator that we have built a committee around this year to look at more closely if this one is an area where we have more room to improve. So interestingly, we saw that Bristol students take courses at a 6% more students in Bristol are taking courses than the state. However, 6% fewer students are passing them when we look at the state. So that's just an interesting way of looking at that data, I suppose. However, this committee made up of our school counseling department chairs, our high school administration has been meeting on a monthly basis to really delve more deeply into what's happening here, knowing that we have so many students that are in these courses. One of the things that we've found is that our recording of the data, how courses are tagged for the state, was not done correctly. And so we're making that correction. I don't think that this data fully represents the percent of our students who are enrolled in dual enrollment courses, because we have to make sure that our systems are aligned to the way that the state is then going to communicate with the colleges. So we've done some work so far on that this year to clean that up. Our next steps are really to delve more deeply in tracking some of the steps that are needed to achieve credit. So I will explain that by, if I look at some of our courses, for example, we have many Project Lead the Way courses that are partnered with the University of New Haven. That means that the students, when they're taking the course at Bristol Eastern or Bristol Central, have a teacher here in town who's also considered an adjunct for UNH. Students have to submit a separate application to UNH to be able to even get the credit to begin with. They have to pay any fees that are associated with that course or have their fee waiver applied. And all of that is happening through communication directly from that college or university to the parent. We may not necessarily know that the parent hasn't responded to that because it's happening at the university side. So we're finding that there are some gaps in that process depending on the number of the varying schools that we're working with. And right now we're working with UConn, Tungsis, or the state community college system, University of New Haven, Southern Connecticut, and I think we might have one with Eastern. So each one of those universities has a different process, and we're tightening up our tracking, working with students to make sure that they are working with their families and making sure all of the steps are being completed. So I am saying all of that because we recognize that this is an area for growth. We would anticipate that we are seeing an improvement in this indicator for next year. You could look at the next slide. That's a Bristol Central, Bristol Eastern comparison. We're slightly higher because, again, as a district, we're considering students that are in any public outplaced facility or also in any private outplaced facility also are included in the overall district data. So these numbers are slightly higher, but we know that we have more room to grow. So the strengths have lots of students taking courses. Compared to other Alliance district, Bristol has more students who are taking AP exams and earning a 3 or better. So we have identified it's really this dual enrollment process that is the barrier for us. And we have this committee underway to really hone in on what those issues are for students. And right now, both high schools are tracking student by student every 11th and 12th grader. The post-secondary entrance is the other challenge that we also need to address. That was the first set of data about the number of students who are leaving our schools and then going on to college. Mrs. Martino, Dr. Martino now, Pupil Personnel Services, works closely with our school counseling department. And next year, they're going to be transitioning their software that helps our students with the college application process, including some of the pre-work as part of their student success portfolio when they enter high school and carrying through. The school counseling department has made that decision to switch platforms because they think it'll be more user-friendly for students and easier for our school counselors to track where students are in the process. So there are actions there underway, although our focus for this year is primarily on that post-secondary readiness, or the percent of students who are earning the credit while they're here. That feels more in our control as a school district. Happy to answer any questions that you have about that.
With the chair. Just in thinking about that gap between students, leaving us and going into college, how much of that do you think is because it ends up being a burden financially, not enough financial aid? People think they can do it and then kind of give up because it's too much money, because we all know, and I know a lot of people face that. And is there a way to track that? Oh, you intended to go, but you're not enrolled.
That's a great question. And I do think that's a major factor for many of our students. When we compare with alliance districts though, so other towns that have a similar demographic to us, we are still lower. So I would like to see us really looking for what we might be able to do to influence that opportunity for our students. One of the ways that we're really trying to tackle that for our students here in Bristol Public Schools is to build out these pathways so that they can get a certification and earn money in a career that would help them ultimately get their college education. So an example of that would be where we have a CNA program that we're building out. That means that for students who might be interested in the medical field, they could earn their CNA, so beginning to learn within that field, become certified within our schools with that CNA certification, hopefully get a job in that field, and that can contribute to some of their access to starting at Texas and then moving on to our state schools. We're trying to intentionally design that approach across all of our pathways, recognizing that as much as you can try to get some scholarship money out there or look at the FAFSA, we do have goals set around our FAFSA completion as well. But college is still very, very expensive. So we're looking for ways that we can help give students some of the skills, give them some access to be able to work in the field while also then working towards their college education.
And just to follow up, how much do you think that language barriers also may have a problem in either going along with that financial situation, or maybe in some other regard, not getting to that finishing point?
Yeah, I don't have specific data on that, but I do know from experience that many of our students, one of the biggest barriers for our students who have a native language other than English is completing the FAFSA to begin with. Many of our students, once they're in high school, are now really on their own and being able to complete the documentation. We do work with surrounding services. Someone from Tunxis has come to the high schools to help our students complete the FAFSA, but there is a little bit of a reluctance on some of our students in sharing their personal identification information with colleges, even though there are protections for students who are seeking that opportunity, but might not have some of the documentation that other students do.
So my question relates to the tracking. So you were saying that they track IDs. So colleges track the IDs and they send it to the state, and then that's how we get the data. So when we have, you were saying the military students or apprenticeships or trade schools, they're not tracked. So is there a way, or are you thinking about ways to try to track those students so you can kind of see like this percentage is not even going to go, so we only are looking for another 10% or something like that?
So our high schools do track the percent of students that go into the military on their own. It just doesn't feed any of our state accountability system. So they're very well aware of the percent of students who are choosing military or choosing trade. I don't want to quiz them off the top of their head right now, but if you're interested in that data, they can get that to you. I think it's ranged from, again, this is my general experience, 5 to 7% military, a little bit higher, 11 to 14 for trade. When we're looking at dual enrollment, it's only for in-state schools. Post-secondary entrance extends beyond that. So there's even some restrictions around or barriers that are tracking it. For example, if dual enrollment and we want a student to, I'm trying to think of an example of a school. Let's say if we want to do dual enrollment and there's an opportunity with Trinity, that's not one of the schools that's recognized by the state that's sharing that information for dual enrollment. So they wouldn't appear here. We don't have any with Trinity. I just was trying to think of a private Connecticut college that we could work with. So it is, again, not fully representative of the picture that we have, but it is still worth kind of pursuing and making sure that each one of our students knows what they're going to be doing after they leave.
But also, and since they are tracking those other students, you can see this data and be like, okay, we know that this amount is on and trade schools, et cetera. So you feel better about those numbers. Then the next item on the agenda is the Next Generation Accountability District Performance Index, also presented by Carly Forth.
This is a lot of data, so I'm just gonna say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So the way that we can think about this report, the Next Generation Accountability System, is like your physical report that you're going to get once a year. And all of the reports, like the one that I just did, is almost like your blood work, right? It's going to look at all of the subset that then is reviewed at your physical about your overall general health. So again, this is similar to what our conversation was about the program of studies. Everything that's going to be represented in this Next Generation Accountability Report has already been reviewed in finer detail, just like what I just did, for college and career readiness at previous student achievement committee meetings. This is the overall kind of report card or physical of the district, physical of the district. The Connecticut State Department of Education has this accountability system in, so that they could track the progress, and so could we, of how our districts and schools are doing across multiple indicators. It helps us identify where we might need to put more resources or attention, energy, time, so that we could make needed improvements. It helps us recognize some of the successes, just like we were talking about with our college and career preparation students getting into courses. And again, it just helps everyone have the knowledge, shared knowledge of how our district is doing as compared to other districts across the state. One of the things that has shifted as we're looking at a broader picture of the Next Generation Accountability. Back when I was a beginning administrator, we would primarily only look at reading and math performance. And you would be really judged as a district by your percent of students who were reading and math. Those are very important, not saying that they're not, but they're not the sole indicator of the health of a district. So this set of accountability indicators is broadened so that we're now not just looking at that very narrow picture of a district success, but we're including many other indicators. And some of them, as an example, looking at the students who are on track to graduate in 9th grade can be a leading indicator for success for students who are graduating within 4 years. So it allows us to really look at outcome precursor data saying, yes, if we get this really strong, then this other indicator is also going strong. So on the next slide, we see all of the different indicators. As I was just saying, it goes beyond just academic achievement to include things like, do students want to come to school? Chronic absenteeism. Do they have access to arts? And do we need to make sure that they have opportunities there? what is the physical health of the students in our district as we're looking at physical fitness, and you heard from Sarah Hill last month. So this in total is how the state has decided we can really look at the success of a district, health of a district. Everything up on the screen that you see that has an H means that they're also going to break that out between the general student population and high need population. High need represents any students who are qualifying for free and reduced lunch, students who qualify for special services, and students who are multilingual. And so we'll delve a little bit more deeply into that. One of the reasons why it might be, so I know this data is typically presented out in November. You're hearing about it now after a few months because we wanted to review all of the subsets of data in greater detail before we could sum up the report. Now, I know you can't see this. That's why I passed out a hard copy of this. That's what you should have in front of you. So I'll take a minute to explain how to read this table a little bit more. So the first column, index or rate, you see for the most part, it's percentages. That's the percent of students who are meeting the requirement for that. That's true for everything except any of the performance indexes. That's because that's a formula that's used to look at the average student performance across the district. It's not looking at a percentage of students. All of the others where you see a percent, that's the measure of that indicator as a percent of students. So for example, when we look at chronic absenteeism, that's 18% of our Bristol Public School students are considered chronic or missing more than 10% of the school year. The target column is the target that the state would like for all districts across the state. That's the same target for every school. So then we have points earned and max points. Not everything in the index is weighted the same way. So this is like going to your high school grade books when you're trying to calculate your grade. There are some areas that are worth more points. So when we're looking at the max point column, we could see that growth is double the weight of achievement. We also see that there's a high weighting around the 4-year graduation, 6-year graduation, and post-secondary entrance. You'll see that by the 100 points. So when we look at the index rate and the target, we can calculate a percentage. So if I'm looking at 63.2 and 75, it is 87, something about 87% of the points that have been earned. So when that's applied to 87% to 50, that's how you get the 42. It's more math than you probably need to know, but that's what those mean. The final column, so then you see the percentage of points earned by our Bristol students, and then you have the comparison column to the state percentage of points earned. So a few things to notice. I already talked about some of the indicators that are more heavily weighted, but I'd also like to just highlight where we are outperforming the state. And I'm proud to say that you see that in a lot of our high need categories. So for example, when you look at the ELA performance index for high need students, we're higher than the state average there at 77% for points earned for Bristol, where 73.2% of the points were earned across the state. That's also true for the math high needs performance index. Science, we've made a concerted effort last year around science, and we see that paying off. And we see now that we have outperformed the state for both all students and high need students. You also may recall, I can't remember when we presented the last data, but our students for our ML students and the assessments that they take called the language acquisition assessment, LAS assessment. We really focused in on literacy with our TESOL instructors last year, and we see again a more positive outcome from that, outperforming the state both in literacy and in the oral assessment. I already mentioned just in the most recent presentation our percent taking courses that were at the max points that we could earn there. And many of the other high school indicators. Again, it's great that high school administrators can be here to hear me saying kudos to their work. When we look at on track to high school and then the graduation rates. In fact, our schools have had some of the highest graduation rates this past year than in many years before. We're also outperforming the state in physical fitness and have earned the max points for art, outperforming the state as well. Where we see some of the biggest gaps, we're seeing one of the biggest gaps in ELA growth, literacy growth. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that shouldn't be new news because we're seeing that many of the students at the elementary level who had high growth in the past have dipped. We're seeing that our middle school growth is strong. Growth doesn't count in the high school. They can't contribute to that indicator. So we're going to focus more intensely on our literacy growth among our elementary. The other area where there is a bigger gap between our performance and the state is in that college and career readiness, indicator 6, the one that I was just talking about, the percent of students who are passing exams. And then finally, the post-secondary entrance, we see that gap that I was just referencing. So that's the overall district picture, just for the 24-25 school year. And if there's any moment where you want to interrupt to ask a question, feel free.
So it's for the whole district. So
Yeah.
is this like broken down by each school? So then you can, hey,
Yep.
we can address it here. It's
Absolutely.
more of an issue in this school than that school, et cetera. Okay.
We're going to get to that. Actually, I have a slide about that.
As a whole school, the numbers just kind of seem like, okay, how do you get deeper into that? So that makes sense.
Also in looking through the chair, also in looking at the growth figures for ELA and math, I'm just wondering what we're going to look at next year based on the fact that this being the year that we had to cut. Which is,
I am deeply concerned about that impact we're doing right now, especially we're very happy that we have a full team in curriculum instructional services. Our elementary humanities and elementary STEM supervisors are sitting in that first row. They have a lengthy list in front of them working on really working with our teams to look at specific student data and really narrowing down how we can better influence growth. But resources are very tapped this year. You're correct.
and I think that's going to be very important going forward in the budget process to figure out how to not, cut off our feet or bite. I don't know what, you know what I mean? I don't know. I can't not cut off our feet. We want to make sure we're moving forward and making progress and don't have something like that to blame on our lack of growth.
Yes, that we want to make sure that we're continuing to provide that level of support with the resources that we have. I know that Superintendent White is she's quoting you now. And, making a case for why we might need to explore additional supports for our students.
Make sure we're engaged in that conversation heavily. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. All right, as we're moving to the next slide, I thought it would be helpful just to take a look at how we're trending over a period of time because it involves so many different indicators and we're looking at whole districts. It's going to look pretty flat. As we're looking at the specific indicators, what I was just showing in some of the previous reports, you could see where then we become, as we drill down, more able to adjust and really pinpoint where we need to improve. We're going to go to the next slide. So this is the 2-year comparison. So looking as a district from last year to this year. Again, this is still a full district picture. The key is over on the left. Anything with a green arrow is where we grew by more than 1%. Anything with a red arrow where we went down by more than 1%. Between 1% positive, 1% negative on it. So very close, not much movement. To me is the gold arrow pointing to the right, kind of stable. And where we've earned the max points, you'll see a star. So again, this is really just showing similar kind of just reiterating some of the points that I've already made. Achievement is pretty steady. It has been growing over periods of time. That's one of the things that actually our STEM supervisor has looked into as we're looking at achievement growing up, what's happening with our student growth, particularly in math. And we're seeing that we might not be accelerating students to the extent that we should be because our highest achieving students are losing a bit of ground. They're not making the growth that we would expect. So that is an area of focus. Sometimes when we think about the interventions that are needed, we're thinking about students who haven't mastered. However, when we're talking about growth, we're looking at the whole range of students, and we really need to be continuing to challenge our students, especially those who are high achieving. As we're looking, so that kind of explains our math growth data there, in summary. And some of the indicators that have shown the greatest strengths, again, are around some concentrated efforts at the high schools to really look at every student and more on a regular basis, quarterly or monthly, respond to the data that's in front of them. We see some of the biggest gains there in indicator 7 on the on track to high school graduation. And that is fantastic to see because that's certainly a precursor to students who are able to graduate in Florida. So when we go to the school slides, one slide away, I want to get to the achievement gaps. This is positive news. I pointed out as we were looking at the overall district kind of report card that our high needs population were outperforming percent of the state. And I think that's one of the indicators that's important. The state does recognize and wants us to be paying attention to achievement gaps. The definition of how they define an achievement gap is listed at the top. However, you'll be pleased to hear and see that we have no achievement gaps based on that state definition as a district. We do have one school that has an achievement gap in science at one of our K-8 schools, and we'll be taking a closer look at that. When schools have a gap that's not addressed, it could potentially lead to their status as an overall district, and more supports might need to be given specifically to that school if they become identified as by the state as a school that's in need of improvement. So we have to get that science gap. Moving to the next slide, we have sometimes we are asked about how we compare to other Alliance districts. You are newer to Student Achievement Committee, so you haven't heard me talk about Vernon, but Vernon is usually the school. You might have heard me talk about Vernon. It's usually the school district that I like to chase a bit. This year, there was a new school that came to the top of the Alliance chart. So of course, I dug a bit more deeply into Norwalk. That was a school that I hadn't seen outperforming Bristol in the past. And so I dug a bit deeper. They did have higher growth scores than we did. We'll be looking at some of their curricular programming for what we could see that's available to us to see what might be in place there that we could learn from. I'm just going to say copy, but we're learning from. They did have a higher post-secondary entrance. So given that that's doubly weighted, I think that was a factor of why we see them outperforming Bristol. And they had a better physical fitness rate by 10% than Bristol did. Bristol this year, if you remember from the last conversation that we had an impact on one of our scores was impacted by participation rate. Well, we're looking at that more closely this year, but that should impact where we stand this year. And then by school. So each school receives their same kind of report card that we were just looking at. And we work with schools to understand so that they understand what that report means for them. So when I'm looking at these two columns, 23-24 to 24-25, that's their overall school performance index. It's the summary of all of those components. And so you could see, as I mentioned, when we're looking at things like ELA and math growth, the performance index of our elementary schools is lower than it was in the prior year, while we're seeing higher performance among our or stable performance between our middle school, any of our secondary schools, middle school, 612 at Bames, our high schools. So our efforts really do need to be concentrated at that. So strengths, we have rising achievement and growth in both literacy and math at the secondary level. We have on-track rates and graduation rates that are continuing to rise. Our enrollment and achievement are rising for college career readiness. Our science results are improving, and we have no gaps as identified by the State Department. Where we have opportunities, we have to, as I've been saying, really looking at asset-based learning, seeing what our students have and building from there. focused on acceleration, particularly keeping a level of challenge among all of our students at the elementary level to get at that growth. We have to continue to address our chronic absenteeism at the schools that have the greatest percentages, which do fall into the secondary. Eighth grade and up tend to be our highest chronically absent students. We have to really and monitor as we're going through this school year, that participation rate for physical fitness. Those are our key priorities looking at this particular set of data. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I know that this overall district indicator talks about like the state comparison. So like it says 71.8 for like the full accountability. So that's our goal, or would the goal be like 100?
Our goal is the max percentage of points that we can get for each
Well,
one.
for
of
each
those
one, so there isn't a whole one. Okay, gotcha.
Carly, when they talk about participation rate, like I'm struggling to get a picture of what that looks like. Cause to me, it seems like, it's elementary school, everybody
Yeah.
is in class, everybody participates. So how does that get figured out?
For physical fitness in
Yeah.
particular, yeah, it's trickier. That's a high school participation rate. That's an issue. So I would say 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, we were required to assess every 10th grader on their physical fitness. The state recognized that different school districts were having students take PE at different years. And so that was causing an issue. And so they said, okay, you can assess student at any point in their high school year, but we're going to use the number of students you have in your sophomore year as your count for your participation rate to figure out that percentage. So essentially the number of students that are in 10th grade at any one of our high schools would become the denominator of that fraction. And we're aiming to get to 90%. Well, that number can shift because you have students coming in and out of sophomore year. And so we have identified that we missed that 90% by a very small number. 4 students. And that drops us when you don't meet that 90% participation, you only get 50% of the points that you've earned. So that dramatically impacted Bristol Central for 4 students. It's a student by student tracker again on that.
Questions? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Latin 2 curriculum revision presented by Leszek Ward.
Good evening, everybody. How we doing? Hanging in there? It's a lot of numbers. Well, we're going from a whole lot of data to some Latin. We're looking at two world language curriculum revisions today. It's world language level 2 actually. So this is continuing course revisions that we started. Yeah, go up. This is world language. I think it's further down. It's in the same. Yeah. So Latin 2 was last revised in 2006. We revised Latin 1 last year. So this is kind of continuing the analysis of updating the curriculum. Really, the main focus was to get the updated curriculum into our US template and to align the curriculum to new anticipated updates to the resources. So that we use the course to next course. The process of releasing the sensitivity was excited about, so it's a chance for everybody to start with some things, figuring out what this change I can't. So Latin 2 really continues the development of Latin language comprehension through more complex readings, while further expanding students' understanding of the diverse social and political landscapes of the Roman Empire. There's a single storyline that kind of goes through the Cambridge Latin course. So they're following the same set of characters in Latin 1 and Latin 2 as they travel to different places. So in Latin 2, it follows Quintus's journey from aftermath of the eruption of Vesuvius, to the villas of the Roman Britain, and then the city of Alexandria. And through these settings, the course explores the tensions of Romanization, intricacies of provincial government, the interaction of distinct cultures and systems. That focus on culture and communication is a little, especially the communication piece, is harder because it's not spoken language anymore. But that's a core component of the 5 C's of world language education. But what you'll see a little bit in the world language, in the Latin targets and during understandings, you may have already seen really culturally focused. And then the learning targets are really focused on communication, which really in Latin speaking. So the 5 units of the course you can see there. And just to give you one example of what that looks like down at the learning target level in the next slide. These are just the first 2 lessons of unit 1. But what you can see, the difference between the target and the success criteria, which is a little bit of a technical discussion at this stage. But the target is really about understanding the text. Again, the focus is on communication. In Latin, really that means did you understand? Right? We want to make sure that students are really focused on making meaning with the language and communicating as much as they can, not just learning about the language. Yeah, the grammar is there. It's kind of how you get to the understanding of what you're reading, but that's why it's going to split out that way. And I just wanted to call that out for you now in this first course, because it's going to be a really big component of the world language revision that you're looking at next. So this is like a small preview of that. These Latin 2 revisions are really continuing what we started last year with Latin 1. Happy to answer any questions that you might have, but really I'm super grateful to Katie Riddick. She did the vast majority of these revisions on her own. And since she did a really wonderful job, she's doing a lot of work to really rethink the Latin program and help students huge share.
Just one of my questions was about assessments. So I noticed that there's unit assessments with reading and understanding and comprehension and passages. And then there's like a ton of that success criteria with the grammar that you were mentioning. But some of like the resource column is in Latin. So are those like mini assessments or formative assessments?
What that really is was Katie moving through those updated resources that we were talking about and flagging like for that specific lesson, what parts of those resources are going to be most helpful to meet those targets and success criteria. So it's almost like it's a little bit crib notey from our perspective, because it's notes to like what section of that course or textbook that she want to use. If there's other things that she's supplementing, if there's another reading that she wants to use, another resource that she has, she may even get it there or mention it there. So that's really what she's doing the same. These are the resources that many are using to teach this lesson.
The assessment development and revision generally happens after the curriculum has been approved and is going to be in the first kind of support for implementation.
Yes, it's just some of the documents have more info on those than others. So I just was like checking, but this does say like resources instead of resources and assessments. So that makes sense.
It's also a little bit indicative of the fact that she's working out from a core resource, right? So she's really looking at that resource and trying to match, flag, pace out what she wanted, what she's going to use, what targets.
Seems like it would be helpful if I understood that. I'm just kidding. No, I think that was making those connections. No, I did appreciate that self-reflection at the end too. I thought that'd be helpful for a student to see like their progression. So I thought that was good. So I need a motion to approve the Latin 2 curriculum revision.
So moved.
Second the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so motion is approved.
I just want to point out that I think you met Katie Reddick last month at the Board of Education meeting, because she has won a mini grant for the 2nd year in a row. She really is dedicated to supporting our students.
Then moving on to the level 1 world language curriculum revision, also presented by Leshek Ward.
So we've got a little bit more detailed of a walkthrough for this one because there's some larger shifts that the World Language Department has really been talking a lot about for the last couple of years that I wanted to make sure I took you all through. And also because this is level 1 of world languages. So this is level 1 of French and Spanish and Italian, which as you were looking at your documents, you probably noticed. Spanish was last revised in 2011, French in 2012, Italian in 2015. So those are 3 separate curricular documents that we're now, all 3 of those courses are working through the same core, which is this curriculum that we're looking at today. There's a lot of goals here, partly because we've been having these conversations for a while in the World Language Department. We're really going to dive deeply into the first 2 or 3 as we move through the curriculum today. The first is to lead with meaningful cultural comparisons and connections. There's 5 C's in the kind of make up the core of world language instruction. Communication is one of them, but culture is another huge one. Communities and comparison connections are others that we really want to make sure that we're helping students make. So we don't want to lose a focus on communication at all. We want to keep it. We want to make sure that we're preparing students to communicate in really authentic contexts and meaningful situations, but also that we're really working with meaningful cultural comparisons and connections as well, which is those first 2 bullets we're going to see a lot of as we move through the curriculum today. We wanted to increase the alignment and the collaboration between the languages. So that's the reason why we went through kind of 3 different curricular documents to one that's going to kind of shape the experience of level 1, no matter which language you're taking. It also gives Italian and French, there's less of those teachers, so it makes them a little bit less separate in terms of the department's work. They're obviously going to be needing to think about their own unique languages and the different cultural aspects of that along the way, but they're kind of part of the same conversation in a way that they haven't always been able to be in the past. We also want to get the curriculum into the new template. I'll make sure that we are aligned to some newly released Connecticut World Language Standards, and that we want to make sure we're targeting levels of proficiency to prepare students for the seal of literacy. So we've expanded that testing over the last 5 years. And so that's kind of ongoing work, but we want to make sure that we're preparing students to communicate and that they're meeting levels of proficiency from the beginning. That's going to set them on a path towards proficiency when we take that assessment in their careers in world language. So kind of an overview first. In the course, students begin their journey towards proficiency in Spanish, French, or Italian by learning the skills they need to communicate effectively in the target language while investigating the diverse cultural products, practices, and perspectives. Each unit builds towards a performance assessment designed to provide students the opportunity to demonstrate their progress towards novice mid-levels of proficiency by engaging in real-world tasks. In the middle of that, those diverse cultural products, practices, and perspectives, what you'll see is each unit is really focused on a cultural product or practice and how it ties to perspectives. So that's kind of like that's how we've really tried to work with that. The units are there. Those are not, in some ways, they're not terribly different. So the unit 1 in every level, every language was also previously previous introductions. There was a unit that was before focused on school life, but you'll see this one's a little bit more focused on a specific product practice. I don't know what that means as we move through the point. So this is one place where you can start to see that focus on culture really start to come through. In the old curriculum, all the units in Spanish had the same 5 essential questions. There was 3 of them there, just in the interest of space. But every unit had those same 3 questions repeated. So what does it mean to communicate and how do I communicate my target language? What is culture and how do I learn more about other cultures? How can I use my foreign language to increase my understanding of other disciplines? So those are directly tied to those 5 C's. We still want students to learn about culture and understand how they learn about it, but we've tried to be much more specific about what cultural products or practices students are encountering in each unit. So again, those 5 questions didn't change no matter which unit you were in. So really, there were more like course level essential questions, which is still kind of true for us, but we try to be much more specific about in this unit, what cultural product or practice you're looking at. So for example, the new essential question is how do the way I introduce myself reflect who I am? It's really looking at greetings and names and what does that mean culturally around the world? Or how do my school experiences compare to experiences of schools and other cultures? And that's really looking at school schedules. So if we look at a schedule, what can that tell us about daily life? What can it tell us about values? What can it else about just the way that students experience school. So we hope that those questions are much more meaningful to students, are much more kind of engaging from the beginning, and that we can have a extending conversation about. And those questions are really directly also tied to enduring understandings. Again, these are a little bit abbreviated for the sake of just kind of showing you the difference. But in the old curriculum, one of the essential enduring understandings was just that the knowledge and understanding of other cultures is gained to examine the products, practices, and perspectives of those cultures. I think we still want students to understand that. That's very broad. And in this unit now, we're trying to be much more specific. So in unit 5, for example, we want our students to understand that what people eat is deeply influenced by history, geography, and cultural exchange. That while food is often tied to a specific regional identity, traditional cuisines are actually the result of lots of global influence migration, such as the exchange of ingredients between Europe, Africa, Asia, and Americas. So that's just a much more specific example, really, of that same enduring understanding of the old curriculum, just articulated and spelled out in a more meaningful way. And that also means this is where you can start to see, even though there's 3 languages represented here, each language now is going to have some differences in terms of exactly what cultural products, practices, and perspectives they're examining. So in Spanish class, they'll be looking at traditional dishes and how they rely on ingredients that may be more native to the region. So for example, the tomato used in Spanish, gazpacho. And in France, in French class, you'll see the same kind of understanding, still the same umbrella, but they're looking at how immigration and colonial history means that dishes from North Africa, such as couscous and tagine, have influenced French as well. And then this is a big addition. We do kind of tend to develop assessments in year 2 of implementation, but for these courses, we're really thinking about working back from the performance assessments, that's the situations we want to put students in at the end of the unit, really trying to work back from that as we thought about the learning targets. So these are right now kind of like our best drafts. I anticipate that we're going to revise and tweak and update them as we get into them in the future. But you can see how they tie to the cultural products and perspectives again. But now the students are really being asked to use the language in ways. So we keep going with that same unit that we were just looking at. They're now going to work with a partner to decide which of 2 restaurants to visit based on their restaurant's menus and personal preferences. So we're going to look at 2 regional menus, 2 menus from French restaurants that represent different types of cuisine. Now they have to be ready to talk about. They have to be able to recognize what's there, what some of the ingredients are, which ones they might like or dislike, and to kind of go through the process of first understanding the menu, talking about it with a classmate, and presenting a favorite dish for them. So all 3 of those tasks are tied to the same cultural understandings, they're tied to the same communicative situation. As at the top of this, everything kind of works back. Then finally, this is now we're getting down to like the learning targets that are going to guide kind of daily instruction. And this is kind of similar to what I was saying a moment ago about Latin, right? So the old curriculum was really focused on grammar. That's kind of what it led with. So in the old curriculum targets sounded like what you see on the left. So I can use Gustard, state likes, dislikes. That's kind of devoid of a context or a reason to use that, right? So what dislikes and when might you have to do that? And in the new curriculum, again, staying in that same unit, I think it was 5, I can ask and answer questions about my own food preferences and dietary tastes during a conversation. You can see that conversation is directly tied to the IPA. That's how students are going to be assessed at the unit. So now they have a reason to use Gustard a little bit more specifically to negotiate with a partner and decide on which restaurant to visit based on the menu, based on our shared pieces. So that's kind of how those pieces fit together. And each unit has learning targets like that, but are tied to the IPA. Students will learn about. There's a long list. I'm really hoping I didn't miss anybody because it's been, there was a couple of meetings that started kind of last spring, actually, and finished up this fall. But what you'll see there is representation from all 3 languages, from both high schools and the middle schools, which was, it was a large group, but it was a really, I think, good thing for the department to be in the same room to have people kind of talking across languages, across levels, get clear on what exactly they were after, just to make sure that you know, that's as strong as the students are having a really meaningful experience in a classroom and school and starting these kids as agency. So there's a lot of work, there's a lot of collaboration. And everyone was really super willing to kind of open up their practice and be willing to rethink things as well, which that always happens when you're kind of collaborating with a larger group to kind of negotiate, well, what can we say, what can Spanish learn from Italian, what can French change based on that situation with language teachers. Everyone was really great about those conversations. So really appreciate all the work that everyone did to help rethink level one, and looking forward to continuing this movement up to level 2 and 3 for and all the business.
I just wanted to say that I took Italian long ago and it wasn't set up like this. And I just appreciate how engaging like the IPAs are. So with the invitation and the home and you just said the restaurant option, it just connects to everyday life and like gives that purpose that I think would engage students. Like I think I would have been more engaged. And just that the structure of the units. The other, and like the ties to history, culture, I saw that throughout. So I just, as a former social studies teacher, I just like, this is great. I did have a question though about, I saw like some of the Align resources were, like it said Italian folder or Spanish folder, but as like a core resource, it didn't really list up. So I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, so that was, I said this has been a conversation that we've been having for a little bit,
Okay.
for some time in the World Language Department. And one of the big decisions that we made a couple of years ago was whether or not to build out from a resource. That does really change things. I mean, ultimately, it was the Spanish teachers at the time that were really leading that conversation. What they appreciated, they didn't want to be tied to a textbook. Things change pretty quickly, right? And a big part of world language education is really promoting the use of authentic materials as much as possible. So things that are written by native speakers for native speakers to be creating to the extent that we can. It's tricky sometimes, especially when we're talking about level 1. But that also allows teachers the flexibility to adapt and change the materials that they're using when things change. I know that the textbooks that we have right now are quite dated. They still, have vocabulary lists with things like CD-ROMs, things like that in there, and that can get pretty dated pretty quickly. Whereas if we're really focusing on resources like schedules or menus, maps, then we can adjust which schedules, which menus, which maps. Those are just kind of representative examples of the kind of adjustments that teachers really want to be able to make along the way.
So those will be curated as your.
That's kind of going to be a huge part.
That's that next, yeah.
Yeah, and that comes with it. That comes with its own set of challenges.
Right.
Because now we have to be curating and looking
Yeah.
ourselves.
But I think it'll be more fun. I think it's great.
And I think that is a challenge. But I think a lot of teachers are excited about that that possibility as well. So.
And you might recognize Kathy Archibald from also the mini
Yes,
grant
I know
reception, and she
the
had
name.
talked about that her grant was really around seeking some real
Books.
world
Yes.
Okay. That's connected to
Okay.
I thought that's why I thought you would be able to make that connection
Yeah.
because she's looking at the platform that is going to provide her with a lot of
Okay.
realia that she could be using in her course. And I picked up on it as I was listening to how she was sharing, but she had said so that we could download it and
Mhm.
have it for future years. So this one-time mini grant is gonna be able to.
Well,
share
that's good.
members of it.
Very good.
I just want to add to, you took the words out of my mouth before. I just thought this was like, I was excited thinking I was, going to high school, picking out this class. It really looks highly engaging. And like we always talk about as teachers, creating authentic learning experiences and having those students engage from the get-go. And I feel that by this is just Latin 1.
Level
yeah.
1, yes.
So I could just see, kids taking this first course and then doing several more years of,
It's definitely the hope.
yeah, I just want to let you know that it's very much appreciated, and kudos to Bristol Public Schools for making learning exciting.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve the level 1 world language curriculum revision.
So moved.
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, motion approved. The last thing is the ECE individual and family development curriculum revision. Is Laura here? Oh, okay.
I'll be
Carly
presenting
Fortin?
that for Laura. Laura has a family commitment tonight. Her son's in a concert, choir concert, so she needed to be there for override. So I'm presenting on her behalf the curriculum revision for UConn ECE Individual and Family Development course. The last time that this course was revised was back in 2004. One thing that you'll see as we're presenting curriculum this year, one of our efforts, particularly in the CTE area, is to take some of the courses that where we were following a university provided syllabus, such as this one, and implementing that syllabus year to year to really go into our curriculum template, thinking about some of the supports that are needed for the wide variety of students who are now enrolling in our courses. So this connects back to some of the data we presented earlier. So the benefits of moving from just syllabus updates year to year to our curriculum template is that it allows us to really consider supports such as those with the universal design for learning or for students who are multilingual. This course, when students successfully complete this course, they'll be able to earn 3 credits from UConn in the Human Development HDFS, Human Development and Family Sciences area. It is equivalent to the 1070 course at UConn, also titled Individual and Family Development. As I said, the purpose of the revision was really, sorry. Here we see the description of the course. We're looking at human development across lifespan, as you can see in the units in your preview of the course, and looking at how contextual factors and family processes shape one's life course. Within this course, students will evaluate the development within the family context, gaining insights to their own lives in addition to what their future both personal and professional lives will be. For grades 11 and 12, there are some prerequisites that are really determined by the university. And so UConn requires that students have 2 years of English language arts, 1 year of social studies, 1 year of science, or have instructor consent. That's why this course is available to students who are in grades 11 and 12. As I mentioned already, one of the reasons or goals that we had for the revision was so that we could use our curriculum template, which helps teachers really think through what kinds of supports could be considered for all of our learners who are in the course. In addition, we wanted to look at how we're continuing to make the course as engaging as possible. And so you'll see that reflected in some of the opportunities for media analysis in each of the units of instruction. And then finally, we have some authentic experiences built into each one of the units. And we wanted to, again, especially because it's in the CTE department, make the connection between your learning in the classroom, the attainment of college credit, and then your future career. The first unit in the course focuses on the development through life space across 7 major developmental theories and learning about different concepts of psychosocial theory. This has the first opportunity for a media analysis, which is through the Netflix documentary, The Secret of Blue Zones, to analyze culture and its effects on life expectancy. Watch that too. I think that's very good. Yes. There was one culture where there is no furniture. And so the sitting on the floor and standing up at one of these blue zones helps mobility as individuals are getting older. So I just take all the chairs out of my house and strengthen my knees. The next unit is as we're progressing through life, you'll see that now that after the students had that perspective of their whole lifespan, some of the developmental theory around that, it's going to focus in on each one of those stages. So the first unit really begins in pregnancy. So it's going to focus on both the pregnant person and their relationships. focusing on the human development from 0 to 2. And in this case, the more authentic experience is for a guest speaker to talk about labor and delivery. Since we have the connection with Bristol Hospital, they do come in and speak with our students. And the second media analysis is conducted using the babies documentary. That one I have it. Fieldwork for Unit 3 is designed for students to experience different stages of child development. So students use their knowledge of child development to design and implement age-appropriate activities with groups of students. Luckily, here in district, we have a number of different age groups that our students can volunteer and work with. And so we do transport our students to different elementary schools across the district using Perkins grant funding, since this is part of a CTE pathway. In Unit 4, as we're focusing on adolescence, students use the movie Inside Out to observe the dynamics of friend groups and its effects on adolescent development. And they engage in a panel presentation at the middle school level so that they begin to promote healthy development in early adolescence. So that's a perfect combination of the connection from media to translating that into an authentic experience, speaking from their own point of view to middle school students using what we have in district. Unit 5, students explore the milestones of adulthood, how those milestones are formed by culture and society, and how things like a midlife crisis develop. In this case, they interview an adult, and students learn about definitions of fulfillment and life satisfaction, and hopefully uncover what it means to gain wisdom rather than regrets. Moving to the next unit, in the last unit, students learn about death and different cultural rituals surrounding death. They self-reflect on what they would like their life trajectory to be. So the final learning targets of the course are, I can articulate my personal definition of legacy and identify the values or contributions I want to be remembered for. I can set goals for my future development, applying the theories learned in class to my projected life path. And finally, I can synthesize my understanding of the entire lifespan to create a vision board or narrative that outlines the life of generativity and integrity. These learning targets allow students to not only synthesize their learning throughout the course, but also set intentions and authentic purpose for their own lives. Finally, we have a teacher reflection on the course and how the community partnerships in particular have grown over the years and the positive impact they've had on their students. If you can to read through teachers' comments. The quote there is from Allison Silva, who is the teacher of this course and writer of this curriculum. So as always, we would like to give a special thank you to Allie Silva and her commitment to this course and her commitment to really re-envisioning it, making it as engaging and authentic as possible for our students. And I could attempt to answer any questions that you have, though Laura has a much deeper knowledge of each unit than I do. And so I could also get you any answers I could.
I took this class at UConn and I don't remember any field work, but even if we had any, it would have been minimal. And I think that this having like the elementary schools, the middle school, the senior center, all of that really kind of takes us to the next level for high school. Like I appreciated that. And the additional resources like the movies, like I don't remember connections like that being pulled in, and I was at UConn. So anyway, I thought that all those additions really make this engaging. I did have a question. I feel like this is related to the last. So some of the learning targets didn't have assessments, but you're saying those would be kind of more fully developed later. But I guess the question is the UConn piece, like, do they have like their own final that students have to pass? I may be able to answer that. They do. The reason why I don't know that off the top of my head, each course from UConn, every time a course is approved, they have their own standards by which they will award credit. So it varies. It's not one standard across all of the courses. Just looking to see if Laura has provided me with that information. I don't have it, but we can get that back to you. I'll have a student achievement. This is a side question just about these college like connections, like students obtaining credits. You mentioned previously that the student might have to apply and like pay. So does that happen with each class? If they're gonna get credits, they have to pay? Yes. That
Uh,
figures, but,
Yeah.
I just didn't really know that for sure. That
It-
makes sense.
One of the things that so there's a couple of things that do help make this more cost effective for our students. They can apply for a fee waiver based on their status here within district. So not all of our students are going to have to pay the full fee for these courses. And of course, it is much more cost effective to take it in high school than it is to take it in college. So it's a deal. It's still a steal. You have to pay for it, but it's still a steal compared to what you can charge.
Those are all my questions. Would we be able to get these slides, like the presentation? So on the date, all that.
That's generally what we need to do with the data.
So when you do those price
Minutes. So when we, after this meeting, we'll send it.
Okay. Okay, I need a motion to approve the ECE Individual and Family Development Curriculum Revision.
I'll make a motion to approve the EC Individual and Family Development Curriculum Revision.
Second?
Any other discussion? Okay, if no, all in favor, say aye.
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 Right, motion approved. And that is the last agenda item, so I will adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.